Multiple casualties are being reported as Ukraine again is accusing the Kremlin of targeting civilians.
Benjamin Hall joins us live from Kiev with more on the Russian assault. Benjamin.
Yeah, Pete, Brian Ainsley, good morning. Yes, and just in the background there, we've heard a very large bang. It's taken some people 4 days to get this far. The UN say 120,000 people have so far fled the country, but it is feared that number could rise to 1 million, maybe 5 million, if the Russians continue their push in this westward direction. It is getting harder and harder to get out of Ukraine at the moment. In many cases, you just don't need tickets anymore. You just have to get on whichever train you can. The once bustling streets of Kyiv now lie empty. People don't come out anymore, except for food, for supplies. Everyone knows that the Russian invasion is coming. The people here will not roll over. They won't back down when the Russians arrive. And the Russians are not far outside the city. For so many different reasons, this could be a true catastrophe, greater than the one that we are already seeing.
Throughout Benjamin Hall's career, his mantra was always, to get the story, you have to take the risks, sometimes enormous risks. And for Ben, no risk was too big. So when fighting broke out in Ukraine, Ben rushed headfirst into a war zone. Through his bravery and dedication, he brought the horrors happening in Kyiv to our nation's TV screens every night. But Ben's work wasn't without sacrifice, as he lost a leg on one side and a foot on the other, also losing sight in one eye after a Russian missile strike. Ben never let that stop him, though, and refused to surrender to his injuries. The story of Ben's recovery will be featured in Sacrifice and Survival, a story from the front line. The author of Saved, a war reporter's mission to make it home, Benjamin Hall, joins me now. When you hear all that explosive activity that we just led in with, does that freak you out?
It doesn't. And for many years covering wars, I thought it might. And there was a time about 10 years ago, I came back from Somalia. It had been particularly brutal, and I spent a while having difficulty sleeping. But I've since been able to turn that side off. When you go to work, you put aside your fears and you focus on the story. So no, I'm lucky that I haven't brought that home with me. I'm lucky I don't suffer the PTSD some people do. And yeah, that's makes
well, if
me
you have anything symptomatic like that, Gutfeld can give you something. When you were initially hospitalized, you kind of came to for a moment. You talk about this in the book, and you thought you were behind enemy lines.
Yeah, that was the first thing I thought, because when the car saved me, the last I heard was Pierre, our cameraman who passed away, saying, "It's the Russians." And so I woke up later, or the next day, I'd have these operations, life-saving operations, and I assumed I was in Russia. I assumed that the patient lying opposite me was a Russian spy and his bed sheets were moving, and I thought he had a gun pointed at me. Someone was shouting at me, holding my State Department press card, "Who are you? Who are you?" And so my immediate thought was, we're in Russia, I'm in the middle of a spy movie, and I've got to escape somehow. And I was thinking, how am I can't crawl, but I'm going to find a way home somehow. And it turns out that I was in Ukraine. I was saved by Americans who came in to get me. But there was that first moment I thought, well, this has just gotten a lot worse.
Yeah, our friend Sarah Verardo did a great job coordinating that. Also, other people within the organization. When you're now back stateside and you've sustained some injuries and you hear people debate about Ukraine and funding, how does that make you feel?
Yeah, it's an interesting debate at the moment. I know there's a fair amount of growing talk that there is a lot of money going to Ukraine, and how long should that continue for? I can tell you for the people on the ground, they think that that needs to continue till Russia is pushed out of the country. As a journalist, I stand in the middle and I tell both sides of that story. But I think Putin is waiting for that. He's waiting for a few years to pass now. He's waiting for Western involvement to cease, and then I think he'll give it another go to try and take over the full country. Are
you an adrenaline junkie? Because this obviously was not your first rodeo. Tell us a little bit about what inspires you to get out there.
I love adventure. I love stories. I like meeting people other people haven't. I like seeing things other people haven't. And that's driven me from the beginning on this job. And I think it's important as a journalist as well. I can't tell you the right story about what's going on in Ukraine unless I've seen it, unless I've been there. And when you've told stories from war, it's very hard to find stories that match up to that. And so once you've done it a few times, it draws you back in. It can be addictive. And I've had to do that time and time again. But you love it, but you've got to be careful when you're doing it. And obviously I've learned just how dangerous that can be.
Well, I loved your book. Here it is, Saved. You kind of ripped my title off, How I Saved the World. I'm going to let it slide. But Benjamin Hall, thank you so much for coming back and writing this. And it's an honor.
But if it sells as well as yours does, I'm a lucky man.
All right. Great to see you.
Thanks very much.